Welcome to our Tiger Success Series webcast today. We share leadership training that builds trust, interdependence, genuineness, empathy, risk, and success in the workplace. Here's our host, Diane Crampton.
Welcome, everyone, to our conversation today. We're discussing involvement and how involvement impacts high-performance team development. So let me know if you're here by sending up a like or a hello in chat. Welcome. I'm glad to see you here today. I'm excited to introduce Scott Zimmerman to you today. Scott and I have both created hands-on and interactive tools for team development. And I think I've known Scott now for over 15 years. So let me share a little bit more about him before we get started. Scott has been working with organizations for 40 plus years, sharing his tools and approach to improve collaboration, innovation, change, and other aspects of team leadership. Scott is known for his Square Wheels image tools and for the Search for the Lost Dutchman's Gold Mine team building game. He presented these tools in over 48 countries. Welcome, Scott. It's great having you here today.
Hi.
Scott, I'm glad to see you here today. Scott, when I think about employee involvement, it means that the voice of the employee is heard and considered for high performance decision making. And I know it to be critical to business, government, and nonprofit organizational success. When employees think and their insights that they share are shared with their organizations, it helps their organizations fulfill their mission and achieve objectives. So when you say nobody washes a rental car, what do you mean by that? And what does it mean for employee involvement?
Great question. We've been playing with this idea of employee involvement, engagement, as long as I can remember. Even when I first did my consulting in 1978, doing on-site work, we would always have classes where we would involve and engage people, asking them to help define the problems, and then working with them to implement solutions. People need to be actively involved and engaged. We all know that. If things are done to people, we will always get resistance. One of the exercises I've done forever is to ask for a volunteer, get them to stand up, and then put my hand next to their hand and slowly start pushing. Invariably, they push back. It never fails. And then you push harder, and even with a guy bigger than me, I can lean on him and push, and he just resists everything I do. And that exercise is natural. People normally resist things being done to them. So I've been playing with this notion of nobody ever washes a rental car as part of my approach to organizations and behavior and change and things like that. One of the Dilbert quotes I use is, "Change is good, you go first." And that just says a lot. Now, this morning, I'm in an interchange with a very, very senior manager of a global consulting company. We're talking about Square Wheels, and he wrote this to me in an email. "The main issue I see is moving from pointing the finger at what is wrong with the situation and assuming ownership for creating what is best and then actually making it happen. There is a danger that we assume a company and its people are aligned with the collective strategy and already have many of the values-led behaviors that would be required for taking ownership and making change happen. It takes a special type of manager to work on, to work on these things as a side hustle. If they are already working on time-sensitive, resource-hungry assignments, which they know they're getting paid for and appraised against. I'm not sure many people would go beyond pointing the finger and sharing ideas without knowing there was some permission to proceed beyond that point. So the issue, as I see it, is that active ownership of these ideas is what's really critical. How do you get active ownership of ideas without pushing? It's about asking. And what we've done for the past 30 years is use a cartoon image. And I'm going to share that image now. We call it Square Wheels 1. And I show this image that you can see, and I ask, how might this represent how organizations really work? And I asked an individual to contemplate that for a minute, and then to work with 4 or 5 other people, generally at a tabletop, but it works online too, to share their ideas. What we discovered after I started using this is that everybody comes in with a different set of ideas about that image. It's surprising how many different perspectives there are. Some people talk about systems, some people talk about leadership, some people talk about just the general issue of things not working smoothly. And by talking about this as a tabletop, as a group, they develop a sense of ownership of their ideas, and they see that others have different but similar ideas. So we play with this for a while. We generate a list of ideas and images and stuff. And then because of this, I'm introducing the language of square wheels that are things that don't work smoothly, but they work, the paradox. Right. And people then will begin to project their ideas onto this image about what their square wheels are in their organizations. Now, the only time I know this hasn't worked was when a consultant in Hong Kong who was with an engineering firm, I followed up with a phone call, how'd it go? And she said, it was terrible. I said, why? And she said, well, like you showed me, I showed them the cartoon and said, how does this represent how your organization really works? And I said, can you say that again? And she said, I showed the cartoon and I asked them, how might this represent how your, and she stopped. And she realized that she had attacked. The training organization had just attacked the engineers by claiming that their organization didn't work well. And that, to my knowledge, is the only time this is of engaged people in this organizational Rorschach test, this ink blot. The image has no reality, but people put their own reality on it. Then they share their reality with other people, and the commonalities come out. And all of a sudden, they begin to talk about their organization as the image, but it's done without attacking them. Yeah.
Well, what resonated with me when you said nobody washes a rental car, is because they don't own it. It's not their car. It's somebody else's car.
Exactly.
And it's like, okay, if it's somebody else's car, they can wash it. They can do the work. They can do all of this stuff. So, involvement, it seems to me, I love that title. I mean, it was just so provocative to me. And so what went through, I guess, my system of thinking is that if people don't own it, and this speaks to, laying things on people, like you were talking, where you have that pushback experience, the lack of ownership. So you don't wash that car is so similar to not feeling like you have any accountability for decisions that are made. And that is like, we're looking at some of the things that I'm seeing in the news now with regard to, like, for example, just large companies just terminating employees by email, no conversation, no heads up. And it's almost like the lack of ownership goes on both sides, both from the organizational leadership side, the executive side, as well as the employee side. That accountability piece, the ownership piece of everyone seems to be an issue, and they're not going to wash that car. They're not going to be accountable for it.
Right.
They won't see any benefit
Right.
to
It's
owning
not
that
theirs.
car. So am I on track? Excuse me. Am I on track with what you meant by that that provocative? I love it. Title.
Yeah.
You don't own it, so why wash it?
There's two sides of this thing. One is the
Right.
leadership side, and one is the employee side. And I'll just keep it real
Right.
simple. The supervisor and the workers, not with
Right.
the blop that comes from the upper management. The
Right.
supervisors and the workers. Okay. The supervisors generally go along by yelling and telling. Okay.
Right.
The joke I make with managers is boss spelled backwards is self-explanatory. And most American audiences get that right away.
Right.
Internationally, sometimes you need to give them a minute to talk about that at their tabletops, and then they
Right.
get it. And then,
Right.
I'm the boss. Yes, you are. So the boss wants to push because that's faster, easier,
There
and
you
the
go.
outcomes are more determined in their minds. But the
Right.
employees are tired of being pushed.
Right.
Nobody ever asks them their ideas.
Right.
So when a little bit of pushing starts, they're all ready to push back a lot harder.
Or just disappear, disengage.
Yes.
Quiet quit or whatever the term
Well,
is.
okay. I've been consulting since 1978, and this quiet quitting, everybody thinks it's some new thing. Nope. It's been going on forever. I can give so many examples, but I have another framework I'll share, and I have a blog written about it. I call it dis-unengagement. And if you look at the statistics, most people are unengaged.
Right.
So my challenge is, what can the manager do to remove the things that are unengaging?
Right.
Well, they
Right.
can't do that by
And
pushing. They have to do it by asking.
Right. That would come by asking employees where their hurdles are. So,
Yeah.
some of the benefits, not only do you get the car washed if employees feel they own it, some other benefits that I see for involving employees include, there's like a greater performance that's achieved because work becomes more meaningful to people
Mhm.
who have helped to shape it. And something that I've been talking about is that it does create more accountability for outcomes. So, and the natural outcome of that is that, performance is higher. And another benefit that came to my mind is that you can attract and retain talented and engaged employees, and you could possibly even spot and head off problems before they become critical. And these are huge advantages for supervisors and executives to be able to hear and respond to or incorporate employees' ideas. So I'm curious, Scott, you have years of experience. And what do you see as some of the strategies? And maybe this speaks to your blog.
Good.
Um,
Good.
what are some of the strategies for increasing involvement if it is currently low in the workplace?
It is currently low in the workplace.
It is.
Everywhere. And doing the normal supervisor things that the normal training departments teach, the workers are tired of it. The workers, many of them have been around for a long, long time, been there, done that. And they don't go for the games anymore because there's never any accountability. The manager will ask for ideas, or human resources will do another survey, and nothing changes. So they are unengaged, uninvolved, unempowered, all that stuff. So what I try to do with the tools is take a very different approach. a surprising approach in that people are asked, what do you see going on? And then they're allowed to play. And that play is, they're not defensive. They can get creative, and then they laugh at the other people's ideas. We're not like that. We're up to our axles in mud. And people joke about this image and this illustration. And then you subtly switch, well, not really subtle, but you switch to, okay, well, what are some of our square wheels? And you let them throw mud at the wire fence. You let them generate any idea they want about what might represent something that doesn't work smoothly.
Right.
And most current processes, from the view of many employees, don't work very smoothly. So now you're getting into discussions of things that could be improved. And with that, you can identify a couple square wheels that might be addressed because they're politically okay. They're easy to solve. And so you get the workers involved and engaged in generating ideas for workplace improvement. Now, when it comes to implementing round wheels, you've already gotten their active involvement. You've already gotten their ownership. They're working on their stuff. And the supervisor then needs to run point for them, to give them time, to give them resources if they're needed, to give them access to IT or whatever other support groups would be involved in the improvement. But you're doing it with them, and you're giving them ownership, and there's no real downside to that, other than not implementing.
Right. Well, and I think about the complexity that executives are facing nowadays, and I'm thinking about how if the culture of the organization in the past has hammered the nail that stands up down, or the person who gives an idea and is told, hey, we want you to do your work. We're not interested in your ideas. Or it comes at them in a publicly or even privately horrifying way, they won't speak up.
I'm too busy to listen to you. I had a boss that did that. I've only got 2 minutes. What do you need? Yeah,
what do you need? Blam, blam,
blam. I've only got 2 minutes for you. What do you need?
So to shift, that had been the common practice in an organization, which is, I think it comes from the thought process that the employee is a cost of doing business,
hands-on,
rather than an asset in organizational success. It's like you don't run a car without oil in it. You don't. You take care of your equipment. I mean, if we put it in non-human terms. So on the human side of things, to engage and to create that type of involvement where the employee is actually valued, I'm finding that in the larger organizations, especially, shifting that cultural approach from not any interest in what the employee has to say. In fact, even on LinkedIn, I commented on a conversation about how employees want to be accountable. And I hear a lot of pushback from the large companies. Oh, they're not responsive. They're not going to be accountable for what we tell them to do, which goes to your pushback analogy. So, when it comes to strategies, one of the strategies I'm seeing that's been very effective, for consultants and licensees, is that they might take that idea that you identified, Scott, that came out of the conversation about where a square wheel needs to be transformed and sanded down to a round wheel, how that can occur possibly in the development of cross-functional teams. So that
you got me. I got 15 things I want to share here.
Well, exactly. So let's say
Okay.
like 5 people can be engaged in that process to sand that wheel and take it completely through the organization, as long as there's, let's say, an executive overseeing that cross-functional team's progress, and they have the time, the resources, the commitment that's installed for 5 people instead of, well, let's say 2,000 people, right?
Right.
That change can come. And when I'm finding that when that change comes with employees, there's maybe an informal leader from the front line that's on that team. Maybe there's a marketing person on that team. Maybe there is, somebody in engineering if it's a engineering problem. I'm finding that these 5 people can do a lot through their involvement and through the oversight of executives. That when it comes from employees, there's almost like a camaraderie that builds in that process, so that employees actually champion that change rather than, again, getting it whapped on top of them. Does that kind of follow with your thinking as well, Scott?
Yeah, you've got me on 15 different hooks here right now in terms of comments.
I
Um,
know. We
okay,
can always go back and talk again.
a
Yeah,
reality is that the ideas generally come tops down. Very few organizations are anymore. They used to do suggestion systems 15 years ago. They work great,
yeah,
but they're
suggestion back,
political.
right,
They're
right,
political because the bottom line people are criticizing the management team for their stupidities from the perception of the manager.
right.
John le Carre had a quote in one of his books, and I've used it for, again, probably 30 years. It's a desk is a dangerous place from which to view the world.
Yes.
Now, when I draw that cartoon, I have 300 square wheels cartoons. When I draw that cartoon for that purpose, I make the rope 10 times longer because the rope functions on the square wheels wagon as an insulator.
Right.
The view at the front is very different than the view at the back. The view at the
Right.
front is, birds singing in the trees, and the view at the back is boards and ants.
Right.
So the idea here is, how do we get senior managers to effectively ask for ideas from the frontline workers? Because the senior
Right.
managers
So
have
you're
the senior managers have no clue as to what's going on at the back of the wagon. And you can test that
right.
by asking them what to improve. They don't have a clue. And they shouldn't
Right.
have a clue.
Right.
They're not there at the back of the wagon. But
Well, and we,
if you
yeah,
have
yeah. Well,
if
and we
you have
have
wagon
cultivated.
pushers, if you have
Right.
wagon pushers, they have ideas for improvement.
Right.
I did a program when I was very junior. This is back in 1978, and we started talking about organizational improvement. And one of the union leaders came up to me and gave me a little booklet of 20 or 30 different ideas he had about what needs to improve.
Right.
One of the union guys. So that was like my playbook.
Right. Well, and
all these
shifting,
things.
shifting that organizational approach from top down and directed to collaborative, it's like turning that whole pyramid upside down, where ideas trickle up. And we have very successful examples of that, especially
Sure.
in Japanese culture and whatnot.
Mhm.
So, Scott, I know that we need to come back and have more conversations, because your wealth of knowledge, and especially the people that are online with us today, um, is so important to us. But we're coming to the end of our
Yeah.
time now. So I
Thanks, Emma.
really want to thank you for joining me.
Let me
And
leave you with one last thought, and I have an
okay,
illustration on this.
All right.
One of the illustrations I have that I think speaks to getting more senior managers involved is simply putting the customer on top of the wagon.
Yes.
So you have a square wheels wagon, the round wheels already exist. The ideas are already there.
Right.
It's not about inventing new ideas generally. But the customer who's critical to the success of the business is sitting on the top of the wagon.
Right.
They know it's thumping and bumping. They can feel every thump and bump, but they have no view as to why it's happening.
Right.
The people at the back feel every thump and bump, and they know that there are square wheels there, but have the round wheel idea. The wagon puller is out in front, ideally motivating his people or her people to get things done.
Right.
And it's working just like it always has, up to their axles in mud in many situations.
Okay. Well,
I asked.
Scott. That's a great analogy, and I so appreciate our time today. So
Thanks,
if you
Diane.
have, yes, if you have a question for Scott, please put it into chat now if you haven't already. And if you have a takeaway to share with us, please put that in chat too. We love to see it. And Scott will be responding to your questions. So please ask them as I do our recap. So to recap, employee involvement is achieved when employees apply their own ideas and expertise and efforts towards solving problems, making decisions, resolving conflict, tending their own boundaries, and communicating. And this level of involvement in your organizational success gives employees a real sense of belonging and connection to you as their manager and their coworkers. And as a result, they become more dependable and accountable, and they accept responsibility for their work and achieve better results. And we are at the end of our time now. And I want to invite Scott back to talk to us again. So let us know in chat how you want that. And we definitely will deliver it to you. And I want to thank you for attending today. Your time and attention is so appreciated. So until next time, here's to your ongoing success.
Thank you for attending our webcast today. At Tigers, we've helped conscious leaders build more cooperation among employees and collaboration between departments for over 25 years. Tell your friends about our topic today. They can join us regularly by subscribing to our newsletter on the web at corevalues.com.